Welcome to Tech Talent Today, where IT leaders share their tough challenges, creative solutions, and latest insights. You'll discover fresh ideas and inspiration here with your host, IT staffing veteran and president of Claremont Technologies, Jody Kulik-Mayer. And now, here's Jody.
Today, I'm excited to speak with Sravan Muthiraj. Sravan is a customer-obsessed product leader with a deep understanding of the insurance and financial services domain. His passion lies in connecting the dots and bridging unmet customer needs with products and services with an eye for durability. He takes pride in his rich professional background as he led multidisciplinary teams, including designers, data professionals, and product leaders. Repeatedly implementing market differentiating capabilities at multiple companies gives him a unique point of view on problems being solved. Currently, he's a VP at a large financial services organization and manages a large transformation portfolio. I'm thrilled he's here to chat with us. Welcome, Sravan. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Jody. Thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast.
So I recently read your article, What is Between You and Your Best Version? And you talk about how to balance work and life as you get more responsibilities, both personally and professionally, and how to reach your potential. And I have to say, your article really resonated with me. That's why I wanted you to come on the podcast. And it's really quite funny that one of the first times that we were going to talk about it, I had to reschedule because my parents needed me. So I was like living your article.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what prompted you to write the article?
It's exactly that situation that you had, right? A similar situation on my side. I have two boys, 110, 15. And, life commitment. And then we have parents. And then we're running around. At the same time, you're juggling work priorities and trying to make sure you're doing the best you can in that role. And when you're thinking about all that, suddenly you're like, wait, take a step back. What am I doing? I think I'm running so fast with so many things. And I started to think a little bit more about that. And I said, I have some thoughts. Let me socialize that. And obviously, LinkedIn is a fantastic platform. So I wrote up some comments on that and how I felt about it.
Great. We'll definitely put a link to it in our show notes. And also, you'll be one of our guest bloggers. So it could be on our website as well. One thing that you mentioned in the article is to find a circle of individuals who can coach and mentor and be a sounding board. Did you build this circle by accident, intentional, a combination? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to be extremely intentional. I think let's put it on the table, because when you're very intentional, then you're looking for it, and it's hard to find people who have the same level of interest in what you want to achieve, or even the support system, right? I think you find the circle over a period of time. You're naturally engaging with them. It could be your own father. It could be your own brother. And then it expands beyond that. It could be somebody who's at work, who's mentoring you and coaching you, and suddenly they become part of that circle. And as we go in our life, I think that circle just it keeps evolving, right? It starts with a much smaller number, and then it starts to grow because you're engaging with new people, interacting with different types of leaders, types of folks in different experiences, and they start to become part of your circle. And it's a decision that you make as an individual to say, do you consider them in your circle? Do you feel that you can rely on them for coaching and guiding and directing? So I think it becomes organic at that point when you start to add and change and manage your circle as you go in your life.
Right. And do you find you also, return the favor, where you're also help be a sounding board to the people in your circle?
Absolutely. And I think that's that's the power, honestly, because when you say somebody's in your circle, it's conversations, right? I think conversations go a long way. And I feel like in those conversations, you're giving as well as taking, right? So as I look at my own team at work, that's what I keep talking about in terms of how do you build a set of advocates? How do you build a set of key people that can enable you to make better decisions in your life, right? And again, an interesting story. I was at a tennis club with my son practicing tennis, and met another parent who happened to be a financial advisor. And we were just chatting, and suddenly I'm like, oh my God, so many common things. And it seems like he's a good person to be in my circle because he can then help me get where I want to go, right? But that just had to happen organically. So I didn't go out looking for that person per se.
So maybe like when you put an intention like out in the universe, then you start noticing the opportunities.
That's
right?
So well said. Yes.
Yeah. So you're a vice president at a financial services firm. Like, what's your career journey? How did you get to where you are?
It's actually been quite interesting. I came to the United States when I was 21 to do my master's. And then from that point on, I took on different jobs. Honestly, I started at a gas station as a cashier. Then I moved to doing internship with a small company. It's a chemical company. That was interesting. Again, learned a lot about how the work culture is different in India versus here. And then I moved on to financial services after my graduation. But again, it was never a straight path. I think from there I moved to, I focused more on my skill sets and where I can add value. So think of things as, I feel like I'm a good communicator. I understand technology. I also understand where the business wants to go. And I feel like I'm a good connect the dots guy. And I enjoy that too. So that led me into many different paths. I got a unique opportunity to build a business architecture organization. Then I interestingly went and did experience design and built a whole design organization. From there, I went to drive data engineering and architecture. And then I said, oh, how would all these come together and then continue to deliver on product management? So that's, I think, the sweet spot, which combines all these different things. But I think during the journey, I didn't know what the end state was going to be. I didn't know that I would be here. I think it was about testing and learning. It was about finding advocates. It was about having the support system to go in a particular direction, right? And continuous learning. That was the other key thing. I was constantly learning. I was open to new ideas. So I think it was an interesting journey. I say it's a very unique opportunity to run data, design, and product management and technology. So it's a very broad set of different capabilities, if you think about it.
One thing that I really liked that you said, I mean, there's a lot of things that I liked there, but that you didn't know like the end point of where you're going. You were just like accumulating experiences and building on it. I think right, you could have goals and they could change along the way as you get experiences. Do you formally set goals for yourself, or like how does that work with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have set goals at different levels. I think first thing is it's very hard to follow goals, right? Just as a human, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think everyone should accept that. Yes. Then comes discipline, then comes commitment. And, at the end of the day, those are the things that will get you to the end. But yeah, goal setting has been critical throughout my life. I've always started to think, again, it is driven intuitionally too, to say, this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do, and start doing little things to get there. Not focus on big rocks to solve in a day or a week. It's really about little things. How are those little things coming along? And I feel like I'm really well positioned in my role because of those little things that then became an accumulation of solid skill set, solid foundation to do a lot more, right? So again, in a nutshell, I feel like having goals is important, but then being able to pivot on your goals very quickly and knowing whether you're in the right or wrong direction is also equally important.
Right. It's like almost going back to your article that, right, you have your goals, and a lot of times they're work goals, and then your life is interrupting them.
Yes.
Right. So it's good to say the pivot and the small steps. Is the small steps something you figured out on your own, or do you read books or engage a coach? Like, how did you decide to go with the small step approach? And before you even answer that, like, I also like small steps. And sometimes when I'm struggling to reach a goal, I try to make the step as small as possible to move forward because you're just stuck sometimes. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think great observation. I think small steps, I think every time we try to take a big step, we realize that it's much more harder. I think it's just the psychological impact of saying it's a small, biteable step and I can do this every day and you're done, right? So I've actually tried this in different places. Things about, I'm not a consistent runner, but I want to run, but I can't keep up with that discipline of being a runner. So I've started my journey with small steps. I said, let me just walk a mile and a half. Then let me turn that into a 3-mile walk, then turn that into a run or a jog after. And that took me months, but I didn't feel like I had to climb a mountain as I was doing that, right? I felt it just happened in steps. I'm learning a lot with my son now, trying to do a lot more in tennis. He's 10 years old and he is like so much into it. And I'm learning a lot from that process, because if I don't break it down for him into small pieces, even when I look at his journey and his potential, it's overwhelming. And I keep telling myself, I cannot look at it that way. I need to look at today, tomorrow, and day after tomorrow, rather than constantly focusing on the really big picture, because then it pulls you back sometimes, right? So again, I think through test and learn, through failing in multiple things that I wanted to do, I kind of figured that out over time. And I'm sure a lot of the folks listening or reading this have the same exact experience.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting, and it's on your LinkedIn page, you have the banner Beyond as your LinkedIn banner. So yeah, tell me a little bit about Beyond, like what that means to you. How did that get up there?
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, kudos to my personal coach, Jennifer, who really helped me find my brand. I think it's very important for us to know what our brand is, because every time we think about an engagement, an interaction, or any action you want to take, you're always constantly bounced against, is this who I am? Is this what I should be doing? Could I be doing a different thing? And so on. I think the brand really helps you kind of align a little bit, gives you a guardrail, and constantly pushes you, because it says, wait, this is not who you are. Sometimes it does the reverse. This is not who you are. Should you be taking action in a different way? Right. So my brand, again, you've seen it says Beyond, right? And that is because that I enjoy talking about futuristic things. I enjoy setting visions. I enjoy maybe not necessarily being in on another planet, but especially with the work I'm doing, I always think 3-5 years in advance. And that is, it was a very interesting process how I landed on my brand, which was really through survey with about 50 plus people that I interacted with, and how they ranked me on different things, like my strategic thinking and my long-term kind of understanding, and or immediate quick go-getter and things like that. So some of the good levers that then resulted in me reflecting on that data to say, I think this is what I want to use as my brand going forward. So Beyond is that, and I think it's simple for folks to understand as well when they just hear it.
Right. I think it's amazing that you're able to get 50 people to participate in filling out the survey. Did you find anything surprising?
I think in the survey, I was surprised how many good things were happening behind my back, because I was just thinking that, so for example, when I'm presenting something at the leadership level or at the company level, I didn't really think I was inspiring somebody who's sitting in the third row thinking about my skills and how I'm doing it. But people have actually written comments in that about how that inspired them to do something. I didn't even know about that story until it was in the survey comment. So those were some really positive things. I didn't really see any improvement opportunities. Maybe there was an opportunity, but the survey was not focused on that type of data collection. But I think overall, the fact that a lot of people responded was also a surprise, to your point, which is how did you get 50 people to respond, right?
Right.
So, but it was constant kind of nudging and making sure that, hey, could you, if you don't mind, right? And people are willing to help if it helps the overall.
Right. I also like that it is like a positive, like it's finding for your brand, because I think it's better to lean into your strengths.
Totally.
Right. Right. You could try to shore up weaknesses, but really it's the strength
Yes.
that's going to drive you forward in the meantime. I also think that just from when we're talking that you are a giver too. That is why people filled out your form. You mentioned to me that you help people with interview prep. So how did that come about?
It was actually an interesting journey because I never really thought about it. From very much in my college times, I was always discussing about this and figuring out how to teach, coach, and be part of other people's journeys as well. But more importantly, I think when you're prepping for like the big tech firms, there is a set routine. I think that's really, really critical that you have when you interview. And that process, when I was doing that for myself, taught me so much. And then I said, wait, I've learned so much now. It might almost be useful if I could convert that into something I can offer or talk about or give it to others who may not have to spend as much time in it because I've already spent that time. So I think that is kind of the core crux of this, right? Which is I've learned something and I want to pass it down to whoever wants the help. That's how it kind of started, really.
Right. And prepping for those really like big tech company interviews, like how long does that take? Does it have a lot of parts? Like, can you put like a general, like not give your whole routine away, but just like a far picture of what goes into that?
I think there is a lot that goes into that, honestly, because when you think about it, it goes back to your own self. What do you want to be, right? What are the things you want to do and you don't want to do? Where do you want to be and where you don't want to be? What are your financial commitments and how does that look like, right? And therefore, where do you want to go and explore more? That's one part of it. The other part of it is really trying to find the job that matches to that kind of description and that kind of aspiration you have. And then when you look at your own stories, the whole prepping process, that can take quite a while too, because in that you're trying to say, how do I show up? And again, the whole brand comes into play, because if your brand is a certain way, what you share with the recruiter or what you share with the hiring manager, it's really important, because then they can start to see, oh, this person has all these beautiful attributes and they could be a great team player and a leader for the company. I think those are, I think the short answer is it depends on you and where you are. Like if you're just starting, it may take you 3 months, it may take you 6 months. But if you are somebody who's a quick, I know my story very well, I know my brand very well, I have the different stories lined up. Like again, I think one of the tip is which we may talk more about is also the tip is storytelling. How do you tell your story to the listener in a way that it resonates with them and it makes you turn your story into something that applies to the situation you are in, right? If you're applying for a particular position, connecting your story to that position is where I think the thoughtfulness comes in. And that could take time because you're trying to think about it, you're trying to connect the dots yourself. And it's not easy, right? I think you'll fail once, twice, thrice. By the fifth time you're talking to a recruiter or a hiring manager, you would do amazing. And that's just the natural development of that process.
Right. I definitely am also a big believer in getting your stories together because they tell the essence of who you are, right? Even more than saying like, I'm a hard worker. like a story that shows that you went the extra mile for another company you worked for, that's more powerful than that. And I also think a lot of people, right? You're working your job, and you're not maybe thinking about your next role and getting your stories in line, right? You're just living your day to day. So I think even if you are somebody who's experienced, you still might need time to get your stories together, and that your stories change over time, right? As your experience changes. Did your brand person help you with your stories, or like, how did you find your stories?
I had to come up with my stories. I think first thing first is thinking about the structure of the story, right? Because what everyone's interested is, can you cut the chase, right? Get to the outcome first, but give them a scenario that you are a situation you're dealing with. Then come up with what is the outcome on the table you're trying to achieve. How did you go about it? And what was the result, right? So it's almost like if you can break your responses into these type of patterns, suddenly you're able to tell much better stories. So people are interested to listen to what you have to say, and that they're getting a lot more out of it. They understand your situation, they understand your actions, they understand the outcomes and how you felt about them. Because again, I have not seen this anywhere, but I think it's really important in the interview prep to talk about how you are feeling as well, because that shows that you are a human and you're constantly able to connect the emotional intelligence to what your work, because that's never written anywhere. I have not seen that in any interview prep or anywhere. I think the emotional intelligence part is very, very, very critical. That is what makes a connection with you and the hiring manager, you and the results do as well. But EQ and emotional intelligence goes a long way.
Right. I guess, what are your thoughts on handling, like, when, I guess it's like a negative feeling, like the situation was challenging? Like, do you have a thought on how to present that?
Yeah. So if you let's talk about things like weaknesses, right? How do you talk about your weakness, or how do you talk about a negative conflict situation? Um, it's hard, but I think what you should focus on is explaining the situation, talking about what could you have done differently, right? What the interviewer is trying to learn from that is how quickly can you understand the problem, how quickly can you adapt and find a way to learn, because those situations will keep happening again and again in different interviews or even different workplaces. So what they're really testing is how quickly can you pivot, how quickly can you learn, would you do more work on your side to change the situation. That's what they're trying to learn. So I think even though it sounds negative at the beginning because the question sounds like that, but what they're really looking for is somebody who's an adapter, who wants to go down to data to get their stories right.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, it's like a tip within a tip, right? That's to handle a very challenging question, because that's a real answer. And like, you see online, people's like how to answer the weakness question is like, I don't know. I don't like what I see there. People know that's not genuine.
Yeah.
Like, I work too hard or whatever.
Yeah.
Like a real story of something that happened is better.
That's right.
Yeah. I also love that you have a structure for your stories, because it takes the mystery out of telling a story. Right?
That's a great point.
Like, now, are you, maybe you're a natural storyteller, or did you develop it over time, or it's a combination? Because, right, you have this structure. So, yeah, tell me about that.
Two things. It's a skill you have to develop. Number one, I think nobody's born with the storytelling, but it is also your own curiosity. If your curiosity levels are high, you're constantly thinking about it. It's to say, I've just delivered a message. Nobody seems to have understood that. So you're going to go back and say, how could I have said that differently? So I think, again, in the article, you'll also see it's the power of you. And the power of you is for you to say, I'm self-reflecting, taking a step back. I'm going to write my notes on what worked well and didn't work well, and how do I improve myself? And that goes to storytelling as a skill, right? Because somebody is trying to tell a story either to convince another person, or to give an update, or to make a relationship happen, or to build a connection. in all these scenarios, your stories could be different, your content flow could be different. But these are things you have to learn. And over time, if you look back at your notes, you're able to say, I think I came a long way from when I used to be very factful versus now I can use the facts to connect it with the human element and to tell the story.
I love that. And I like the review piece because maybe it helps take the emotion out of it. Because sometimes you're disappointed how it went. And it's hard not to just be mentally negative. And then, right, you have to go forward with your job search and you're feeling negative about it. And I think how you present that takes, the emotion out of it and lets you go forward in a positive way. So love those tips.
Great.
Now, I know you manage a very large team and you interview a lot of people. Now, just to get into your head, so job seekers could know, like, what are hiring managers thinking about when they're interviewing you? So, like, what are some of the things that you think about?
So as a hiring manager, again, I think this goes back to some of the points I mentioned, is how is somebody able to articulate their journey, right? Are they thoughtful in what content they present in the interview? Because typically you're dealing with time here. You have 30 to 45 minutes as a starter and you're talking to people because you don't have a lifetime to know each other. It's an interview call, right? So in that, how do you make the 45 minutes very meaningful? But I think it goes to two sides. I found people who are incredible interviewers, meaning they show up naturally inclined to learning about you in the best interest of you. And therefore that powers you. And I've given these comments to some of the interviewers to say, I showed my best self on this call because of you. And I just want to let you know, right? I think that happens. If they are interested and they're excited about hearing the parts you're explaining, I think suddenly there is magic happening, right? So I would urge hiring managers to show that level of connection to your candidates so they feel really good. And instead of feeling discomfort or feeling the need to just keep piling data and data in the discussion, make it conversational, learn more about them through impromptu questions that could be different questions that may not be directly about everything work, right? That's where I think real magic happens. That's where you find connections rather than a candidate. And once you find connections, you can make I feel like work is an easy thing. Everything else around it makes it hard. If the right people are solving the right problems with the right intention, I think we can solve any problem.
Right. I love that, like, right, a good interviewer almost brings out the stories from the interviewee. And when you said, like, when people are not feeling comfortable, they just give like a lot of data. And it's funny because I was going to ask you what you think the biggest, most common mistake you see, but like that's the most common mistake I see as a recruiter. People just giving data.
Yes.
And not connecting. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that one of the common mistakes that you see as well?
Yeah, the common mistakes is not focusing on the question. I think the point is not focusing on the question. If you're focused on the question, like the question you asked me earlier on about weakness, right? The question could be spun up into a different way to explain the answer rather than thinking of it as a direct weakness. What is your weakness? Like, I am a detail-oriented person. I'm like, what does that even mean, right? So I think a lot of times people interpret questions in a different way. So I think that takes learning too. Again, what are different ways to interpret questions? How do you prepare for that through online sources and through interview coaches will help you go a long way. Because a lot of us have answers. Skills can be built, right, over time. And then stories are things you've already built and you're able to share them, right? So it's almost like that's where I see is the biggest gap, in my opinion. People don't understand the question itself. Therefore, there is the need of putting more data on top of it. Therefore, there is more need, like trying to balance it from many, many angles.
I think also maybe sometimes people are nervous and they forget the question. So they're just giving data.
Possible. That's right.
right? Or like
That's
one
right.
question. Yeah.
And I think that's for a hiring manager, Jody. For a hiring manager, I almost feel like it's important to say, can I repeat my question one more time? Because I'm feeling like I am not getting the response I'm looking for. Let me re-explain myself, right? And I think that's totally okay, right? It's not important for the hiring manager to say this person doesn't understand me, so he's not the right candidate. A lot of times you'll find really amazing candidates. If you're able to re-articulate your question to them, then sometimes you do find those diamonds, right? And I think you don't want to miss those people from your team because they couldn't interpret your question. That given an employee or a candidate is going through so many things in their head at the same exact time.
Right. Like interviewing is a skill. And it doesn't mean that, like, if you're an okay interviewer, it doesn't mean you're not going to be a great employee and do a great job. So it's wonderful if the interviewer can like dig out what they need to show how they're going to perform in the role.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So much good stuff in this conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm wondering if you have a parting thought.
I think parting thought is, again, I think the power of you, right? I would just want to let all the audience and folks watching is you have so much more control than we think. We underestimate our own control and the levels of control we have on our direction, right? And each of our journey is unique. So I would take it up with a lot of optimism and continue to focus on things, and nothing is not learnable, right? I think keep that attitude of a growth mindset, and I think the sky is the limit.
I love that, and that's such a positive note to end on. Sravan, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for making the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Tech Talent Today, brought to you by Clearmont Technologies IT Staffing and Search. You can find out more at clearmonttech.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share. See you next time.